Hi everybody, welcome back to AP Psychology with me, Miss Baines, your teacher, where you can take advantage of being able to pause me and rewind me as I deliver you the latest content. So go ahead and grab those felt tip multicolored markers, get yourself a nice comfy space in which to work, and of course don't forget those ever important binder notes that go lockstep in order with this video, called Unit 5, Video 1, Introduction to Memory. I'll see you on the other side. Okay, so welcome back to our largest unit thus far, which is our Cognitive Psychology unit, Unit 5, which, as you can see by our 2 pages of learning targets, is about cognition, right? All about how we think. Cognition is thinking about thinking. We remember that from our cognitive perspectives from our very first video, right? Your first section of notes in the Intro to Memory section is going to be on pages 1 and 2 of your binder notes. You will absolutely need that extra page that I put in there to get all of the nuances down, okay? So make sure you write legibly, because while it's only a few concepts, it's a lot of writing. So, because this unit is so large, we're going to break it down into 4 different concepts, okay? 4. So the first going to start with is memory. This includes the encoding, the storage, and the retrieval of memories. Then our second concept will be forgetting, or what we call errors in memory. And the third is called thinking and language, which these 2 are pretty short, so we'll cover them together. And finally, the fourth one is intelligence. So those are the 4 different sections within the unit that we call cognition. They will all be on the Unit 5 exam, and we will have 1 quiz for each of the 4 concepts or sections that make up this unit, as I have listed it above. So each one of these concepts will have its own quiz, okay? Okay, so let's talk about memory. Hello! Because of me, you know who your friends are. You know the English language. You know your favorite song. And you know yourself, right? You don't have to necessarily write this stuff down. It rings true for you. Memory is the reason why we know all of these things, right? Why you know the English language or whatever languages you might be learning. It's how we all know the lyrics to our favorite songs, all the plots to our favorite Disney movies or fairy tales, right? Memory is any indication that learning has persisted over time. Okay, that's the definition. It should make sense to you. Our ability to both store and then also reach back and retrieve all that information that we have learned, or each of these moments in time that we have experienced. Okay, so tell me your memories. Write down all the things that come to mind when you hear the word yellow. What did you do on your last birthday? Describe the events that occurred the last time that you were in a restaurant. Who is this character? One idea here leads to another. It's similar to what we call stream of consciousness, or a spread of an activation of a schema. You've just reconstructed the memory of what was happening before telling it. We all have unique memories because of our unique life experiences, right? These are called episodic memories. But we also have similar memories or understandings called semantic memories, okay? This is a huge unit with lots of vocabulary. It's crucial that you understand the terms first as best you can the first time, making them meaningful by thinking of examples and how it relates to the term itself. Okay, we're going to start our note-taking now. So a flashbulb memory is a kind of intense memory. Flashbulb memories are these highly emotional moments in life, and they give rise to a very persistent, strong, and clear memory. However, this type of memory is not free from errors or free from forgetting, but we just tend to remember them because they are so strongly embedded in our minds. Flashbulb memories, or a lot of them anyway, are pretty big life events. For example, people my age and your parents' age can usually recall exactly where they were on 9/11, or when JFK or John Lennon or Princess Diana died because of the paparazzi following her. Most people can remember exactly what they were doing when they first heard about 9/11. For you guys, it might be the death of a loved one, or on a more joyful note, the birth of a younger sibling, or maybe you had a broken bone or some surgery at some point, or on another more joyful note, your first kiss. Or we could all remember the horrible moment when COVID-19 hit the world and the world shut down, except for the schools. We were kind of happy about that, I guess. All of us needed a little break. Dare I say, the whole world shut down. Any one of those could be considered a flashbulb memory, whether it's something traumatic, joyful, scary, or exciting that has happened in your life. It would be what psychologists refer to as a flashbulb memory, because all of these things involve strong emotional moments, both good or bad. So the flashbulb memory is that which has an emotion tied to it. So here's a little something you may or not know about me, depending on if you had me for ELA, for example. For me, a very clear flashbulb memory was the birth of my daughter and then the death of my mother. Having my daughter had been the most joyful moment of my entire life. But sadly, it became darkened by the saddest moment in my life, was when my mom died, when she came to help me take care of the baby and visit me. These two flashbulb memories are now enmeshed into one. Both are so clear in my mind because they happened within days of each other, and each was a very strong emotional experience that I will forever see and feel with remarkable clarity inside my mind's eye. Okay, so flashbulb memories for all of us are memories that really stick inside of our head. They stick around very clearly. However, like I said before, flashbulb memories are not free from errors or what we call forgetting, which we'll talk more about that phenomenon later on. Okay, for now, what are the 3 different stages of memory? First up is encoding. Encoding is the idea of actually creating the actual memory. So this is like you going through a particular experience that becomes the memory, okay? Another way of thinking about it is like when you're typing up an actual report or essay or maybe even a practice FRQ, okay? Encoding is the process of creating a memory or the typing of that paper. The second part of the process, which goes in sequential order, is called storing or storage. Storing or storage is when you actually store or save your report. In this case, your memory. It is when you save your thoughts. So let's say you're working on your essay, okay? Encoding would be you typing it up, right, the extended essay, and the storage would be you saving it to, say, a flash drive. Once you have saved it to your flash drive, you might save it on a backup to your hard drive or your computer, and then maybe just to be safe, you might email it to yourself too. You have saved it in multiple places, right? Well, that's kind of the same way that memory works in terms of how permanent that memory will be. So that's all about the storage of a memory. Next, we have the subsequent retrieval. Retrieval is when you go back into the hard drive to reopen up that file, to get that paper to work on that essay again. So you're going to pull it out from the file, you're going to retrieve it from the computer, you're going to go into that folder that it's in, into that tab, and pull it back out because you've saved it. You've saved your extended essay on your computer's hard drive. Just like we can pull up past memories from the deepest parts of our minds. It's easy to think of this process in terms of computer storage, but our brain is not quite as exact as a computer, right? Computers are accurate in terms of storing whatever file it is that you saved exactly as you saved it. We humans do not remember things so precisely as that. Not exactly how our computer files are stored or encoded. And that is because there are a lot of things that come into play with human memories. Humans are flawed. We're dynamic. We're emotional beings. And when we are storing and encoding memories into our brains, all of those things color and shape how we remember that experience. So we're going to talk about a few different things now. The first model of information processing that we're going to talk about is called the 3-stage process of memory. This first one was put out by Atkinson and Shiffrin. 1968 came up with this model. And there's 3 stages of memory. The first is sensory memory. And sensory memory is our very, very, very short-term memory, okay? It's very, very short. So this is an idea like the sensory information coming in. Short-term memory is things that we pay attention to. The sights, the smells, the sounds, all of that sensory input, all of that. And then we store it in our brain for a very short period of time, not knowing what parts of those things that we're going to keep. Then next we have what we call our working memory, which we're going to talk about right after we cover these long-term memory things. Our long-term memories, okay? So again, our long-term storage in our brain of those memories can be broken down. Okay, so first we have sensory memory, which is the initial momentary storage of information. This only lasts an instant in our short-term memory. Think about your senses. Unless you specifically think about them, or someone says, hey, look at this, or hey, come over here and smell this scent. That information is not going to be stored long-term. Only for a couple of minutes while you're on the topic, right? So, like the information that you are seeing all over the place, you're not going to store every little bit of it that comes in through your senses, unless you actually pay careful attention to it. So, with sensory information, we are taking everything all in passively. And then our brain makes a conscious decision if it's important enough for us to pay full attention to it. If the information is not that important, it is passed on, it is lost, and this is called decay. Or we also call it a displacement of memory. So think of sense memory as kind of like a snapshot, okay? It's on a constant replay, right? Think of closed caption TV, right? You're watching your Nest camera or your Ring camera, or even a camera in a store that is filming from above. All that information that you're seeing on the screen is only there for a moment, and then as soon as you see it, it's gone. Okay? Unless you press record on that machine, it's only there displaying what is there on the screen for that moment in time, the moment that you're watching the information. You're watching it in real time, and then it's gone. Okay, so here's some evidence of sense memory. Okay, so you see the sparklers here? Now, does a sparkler actually make each of these letters C-O-O-L? No, of course not. We see the sparkler in this point for just a moment in time. The picture happens to capture those few seconds of motion, and because now we've paid attention to it, it becomes a word in a moment of time. Cool. But then it disappears when the moment stops, or the sparklers die out. Okay? So be sure to remember that a short-term memory holds information only for a short period of time. It is not permanent. Usually your short-term memory lasts about 30 seconds. Okay? It lasts about 30 seconds, and we have a very limited capacity in our short-term memory. We can hold on to about 7 items at a time. The magic number is 7, right? In every world religion, 7 is significant. In magic and folklore, 7 is lucky. Well, it's also important to psychologists as well, because they figured out that our attention span, on average, can only hold that many items. It's why telephone numbers are 7 digits, so that people could actually remember them before we had apps to do it for us. Okay, so 7 items plus or minus 1 or 2 that we can keep in our short-term memory each day or for a very short period of time. Basically, this is an idea like a waiting room in your head, okay? It's like a place, a temporary storage place in there just for a short period of time, and then we decide if we want to keep it or not and let that into the real storage of our brain. We can now store more information, more than these 7 things, if we chunk or group together those items. So for example, if you take a look at all of these letters here, right? You can't remember all of them and recall them, but if I chunk them together into meaningful groups, we can tell what they are now, right? PBS, Fox, CNN, ABC, CBS, MTV, NBC. We can remember now all of those because we have 7 different items here that we all recall from our day-to-day life. Individually, we wouldn't have been able to remember them. If we don't rehearse it or memorize the information, it will leave our short-term memory just like that, just like the sparklers died out. Think about it. If you need a phone number, you have to repeat it over and over until you have a chance to either write it down or store it in your phone, right? That's because you're in rehearsal mode. You've said that phone number over and over again in order for your short-term memory to memorize it and keep it there until it has somewhere else to go. And that either goes into your long-term memory or it gets decayed or displaced. Bye-bye. Okay, if you don't need it anymore. Okay, so for long-term memory is the memory that stores information on a relatively permanent basis, okay? Psychologists believe that it kind of has limitless capacity. We don't really have any limit to how much we can store in our long-term memory. We can file our long-term memories into different categories so that when we retrieve it, we can retrieve it. You know that at a particular moment when we need it, we can go in and get it. Long-term memory, however, can go by the phrase, if you don't use it, you lose it. Eventually, those long-term memories are going to be discarded or decayed if they aren't used, or at least they'll be quite repressed, and it will take some doing to pull them back up and trying to remember them. This means that there are some problems with this model, right? First of all, some information skips those first two steps, right? Some things enter into our long-term memory automatically. Some things we don't need to even pay attention to them. They just stay there, right? Think about the implicit memories of latent learning, right? For those kinds of things, we're not even necessarily paying attention to them. They just kind of happen, like how to turn a steering wheel, for example. No one really has to teach you that turning a steering wheel left is going to make the car or the bicycle go left, right? You don't really have to pay attention to that type of a thing, but you noticed over time how it works, and now it's part of your long-term memory. And the second thing that's wrong with that model is since we cannot focus on all of our sensory information in the environment, we select information through attention selection. That's important. So we have this selective attention, and it's important for us to have selective attention, or our brain would be completely fried, right? We consciously choose what to focus on or what to keep. And then finally, the third problem is that the nature of our short-term memory is more complex than it's just sitting in that little waiting room waiting to go either into long-term memory or to become decayed or displaced. So the three-stage model by Atkinson and Schifrin in 1968 was therefore replaced by a working memory model by Badley and Hitch in 1974, who then came up with this much more inclusive model that expanded on the three-stage model to include, what else? Working memory and automatic processing, okay? So working memory is a newer understanding of short-term memory. And what this does is it adds a conscious active processing of incoming sounds and sights. It also is giving us what is coming back from long-term memory, okay? So what's coming in our auditory and visual information. So it's kind of the place that we go to work all together to make sense of it, okay? So working memory is the processing area. So it's where we process information. Short-term memory model is the idea that it just kind of sits there, or it's there when we pay attention to it. Working memory is an idea that we're processing that information that is in our conscious state right now, okay? So this model, the short-term memory, has multiple components to it, actually. It doesn't just sit there. The first is called central executive. Okay, central executive controls our slave systems, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. But our central executive controls our attention, both at the automatic level, right? Those automatic habits or routine procedures. But it also does the supervisory attention level. So it's a unique situation. So some things that are new that we have to pay attention to, right? It tells us where to look. It tells us what we should be listening to or for, okay? So that's one part of short-term memory. So when do we use this working memory model? Well, We use working memory model to learn, say, a phone number, or nowadays a web address, or maybe your social security number or OSIS number for the very first time that you ever saw it. We use it for things like directions. Go straight, make a left, 3 blocks down, make another left, go 3 down, make a right. We use it to calculate a bill at the supermarket based on the items that we look down at into our basket and round up. Or for, say, a waitressing tip, right? Figuring out what the percentage of a meal is. We use it for cookbook directions, right? But you don't have that recipe in front of you, and so you hold those items in your head. The central executive also tells us which slave system should be working at a given time. Okay, the first one up is actually added in the year 2000, and we call it an episodic buffer, like what we've just been talking about. These are the temporary and passive display stores when we are trying to recall a scene or a sound. Okay, so in other words, write this down too. This is a picture, say, a room layout, or think of a song or a music video, and we can see it in our head. Tolman called it our cognitive maps, right? Okay, so these episodic buffers allow us to also bring back information from our long-term memory of previous scenes and sound. Okay, next up is our phonological loop, or our inner voice. Okay, that's the inner voice that we hear inside our head, right? We all hear that voice. Some say it might sound like yourself. Some people say it sounds like your mom or your dad, or maybe it sounds like your BFF, or I don't know, maybe you hear God. Who knows? But it's that inner voice that we all have inside our head telling us what we should do. Okay, finally, the third one is called the visuospatial sketchpad. Okay, this is what you talk about when you're doing mental math, right? You can visualize the problem hanging right there in the air before you, or a word problem. You see an example from a textbook, and then you remember the next day where on the page it was, even when the textbook is closed. Okay, this working memory model explains our ability to multitask. The central executive is taking control of these automatic things that are happening, and all of these components are taking place at the same time. Here's a nice little graphic here that shows how the transactional theory of the memory model is working. So here, the central executive, the information is going back and forth between the long-term memory and the central and executive, and then our 3 slave systems across the middle. Our episodic buffer here, like our cognitive maps, our phonological loop, our hearing of our inner voice, and 3, our visuospatial sketchpad, seeing that math problem hanging in the air. Okay, here's another one that you might prefer to look at. It's basically showing the same exact thing, that all these things are coming back and forth between each other, happening at the same time. Okay, that's all I have for you today. Have a great night. Bye now.